Listen, I don't know what day it is anymore, so I'll just get to the point, which is that I found a new room in the house, and just like that, it was 1996. I'll start over. To say it was a new room isn't strictly accurate. I just mean I don't know where the room was all this time. Did it appear out of nowhere, or did I miss it? Did it move, or did I forget it was here? You could tell me anything and I would believe it now. What was indisputable, though, was the stench. An absolute reek of rotting meat and gasoline. Where the smell was coming from, I have no idea, because the only things in the room were a cast iron fireplace on one wall and an old TV VCR combo sitting in the middle of the floor. Perched in the mouth of the VCR was a VHS tape with a label that said, in faded black Sharpie flanked by 2 upside-down crosses, Plague Rats. Or Plague Rights. The last word had been crossed out and replaced with another and back again multiple times. But that's not the part that matters. What matters is that I pushed in the tape, and I disappeared. When I say I disappeared, I mean I ceased to physically be. I had no form, no feeling. I could hear and see, but that was all. I was effectively a ghost hovering in front of Seamus House, while 3 lanky teenage boys with long unwashed hair and equally unwashed band t-shirts stood staring up at the place as if I wasn't even there. Their arms were outstretched, and they were chanting some kind of gibberish that I guess was supposed to sound like Latin, and then one of them turned and looked right through me. "I am Sven," he said in a comically deep voice. He gestured theatrically at the other 2 behind him. "And they are Rasputin and Bloodworm." "We," said the one identified as Bloodworm, "are Plague Rats." The one called Rasputin roared in a pantomime of demonic delight, but the one who called himself Sven rolled his eyes. "It's fucking Plague Rights, Craig. Rights. We decided." "Sorry, Nate," said Bloodworm/Craig. The other one mumbled something I couldn't hear, and Nate groaned. "Oh my god, what, Matt?" he said. "I'm tired of you guys not taking this shit seriously. Never mind, just keep recording." Nate was behind me now, and I couldn't see him, but I could still hear him talking to the others as some invisible force compelled me to tag along. I learned the boys lived not far from here. They had started a band. And though they had no musical training, and only one of them had ever even left the state of New Jersey, they were determined to be the ones to make European black metal big in the States. Given their limited musicianship, they had convinced themselves that filming a satanic ritual and disseminating the tape would get the notoriety they were not able to achieve as musicians. And it would finally get them out of what they referred to as this small-minded suburban shithole. Seamus House was abandoned and likely haunted, they'd heard, so it was the best possible location for their questionable plan. I heard Nate's voice ask about pig's blood. "Still in the trunk," said Craig. And suddenly we were moving towards an old sedan parked just beyond the open gates. I watched as Nate opened the trunk and retrieved 2 greasy plastic buckets full of burgundy fluid. Nate shouted, "Shit, it fucking leaked!" He said, "We have to get this out or my dad's gonna kill me. This car is brand fucking new." Brand new, I thought. Matt snickered. "You mean the Taurus is new?" he said. Craig stroked an invisible beard. "The Taurus needs gas, Nathaniel," he said. "Nathaniel," mimicked Matt. "You haven't waxed the Taurus this week, Nathaniel." Nate sighed. "Shut up and help, buttholes," he said. It seemed like I blinked and lost time because I abruptly found myself looking up at the gates again. "Seamus House," Nate read. I heard a whirring sound and felt myself moving closer to the name on the gate. Matt and Craig were laughing in the background. In another blink, I was looking down at the gravel drive. I had no ability to move my head and look up, but I could hear the boys talking to a man whose voice I recognized to be Mr. H's attorney. "How did you get through the gate?" he was saying. Nate struggled to find an answer until Craig said, "I don't know, it just opened when It was already open," Nate interrupted. "We were actually just trying to turn around." The attorney did not seem to care about this answer, and instead asked what was in the buckets, but the boys were silent. The attorney said, "Never mind, you can do what you like. Your coming was rather fortuitous, as I was driving by to see if the house sitter had arrived. But she appears to be a no-show. I'm sure the three of you could use some extra cash." You know what comes next. The attorney offered them a familiar deal. 12 days. If they would house sit, they could do whatever they wanted here, and he would pay them $100 each. But they had to accept now and tell no one where they were. The owner was very private, he said. It would be easy money if they followed the rules. The members of Plague Rights huddled together and talked quietly but excitedly. This was perfect timing. They could even record their album while they were here. A black metal album recorded in a haunted house. It didn't matter that Nate could barely play his guitar, that Craig's metal scream always ended in coughing fits, that Matt's drum set was a Casio-tone demo button. They already had everything they needed in the car. It was meant to be, they agreed. I wanted to shout at them. "Come on, you idiots. Do you really think you can trust this man? This man who shows up out of nowhere, bribing 3 high school kids to do whatever you want, in an abandoned house for nearly 2 weeks, with no time to so much as think it over?" But of course they accepted. We all do. I found myself inside the house now, seeing the same rooms I have already seen, but with decor I haven't seen anywhere in decades. Picture oak everywhere, and pastel everything, with wallpaper patterns reminiscent of movie theater carpet. A calendar mounted next to a glass back door shrouded in ivory vertical blinds confirmed what I already suspected. 1996. I followed along, as if I had any choice, while the boys walked from room to room, exploring what I knew to be their prison. Most of the rooms were disappointingly empty, apart from a mattress or a chair here and there. In the kitchen, they discovered a sufficient supply of food. They found the phone, but it didn't work, and this didn't particularly bother them. I soon discovered why. Nate's widowed father was away on a work trip. Matt's parents were away on their annual summer cruise. Craig's mother was simply away. Something told me that these boys' parents weren't the type to check in. Something also told me that Mr. H targeted them for exactly this reason. Don't ask me how, I've stopped asking myself. What I knew now was that there were 3 adolescent kids already looking bored to death in a house that would undoubtedly be all too interesting very soon. "This place sucks," said Nate. "It only looks haunted on the outside." "Maybe we should do the ritual outside then," said Matt. Craig flicked his lighter repeatedly and yawned. And now we were standing in front of a locked door. "I'm telling you, I already tried that one," Nate was saying to Craig. "None of the keys work." But Craig simply turned the knob. The door opened easily. He shrugged and walked in. "Dude, how are you fucking doing that?" said Nate. "First the gate and now this door?" "The man's got the touch," said Matt's voice. Craig suggested that the door must have just been stuck. I was with Nate on this, though. Something didn't feel right. The room they found inside, however, felt exactly right for their satanic shenanigans. It seemed all the creepy antique decor one would have expected in a house of this age had been limited to this one room, while every other had been cursed with dusty seashell soap as an entire aesthetic. An aesthetic that felt oddly safe in comparison to the suffocating darkness enveloping us now. Sunlight glowed red through the filter of crimson drapes. A cobwebbed cast-iron fireplace made for the perfect altar, and I realized I recognized it. This was the same room in which I had found the TV, and the videotape that, I guess, transported me back in time. But now there was also a velvet chaise lounge in here. The walls were covered in dark purple damask. There were small portraits and elaborate frames mounted there too, but I couldn't get close enough to look at them in any detail. I did notice that the subjects were all wearing mourning clothes, and a thought popped in my head that these could be a series of portraits of a family devoured by the house one at a time. In retrospect, that doesn't make any sense, because I'm picking up on the fact that no one who ever stayed here could have done so long enough to sit for a painting, let alone 6 in succession. These 3 naive boys couldn't have explained that any more than they could know just how naive they were. For at that moment, they were celebrating their find. There was so much inspiration here. This could be where they'd record their album and maybe even some music videos. In 12 days. They reminded themselves, however, that the album they hadn't even written yet wasn't the reason they had come here. They had come here to record their defining moment. This ritual they'd no doubt pulled from a bad movie in honor of a devil they didn't really worship. Plague rites had to put themselves on the map, but they didn't have the stomach to burn churches as one of their favorite bands had done in Norway. They'd have to settle for desecrating an old house, and then cleaning it up before someone told Nate's dad. And then it was night. Then the ritual began. The boys had brought a bag of candles with them, tea lights in that familiar shade of greenish blue that I instantly associated with that salty chemical scent meant to evoke ocean waves. They arranged these in a circle, and then positioned a plastic Halloween skull in the center of the mantle. They decorated their faces with the corpse paint they saw their favorite bands wear, and practiced their most ghoulish expressions. I was finally still for a minute, as if I'd been put in a corner to observe. I saw Craig walk up to me, but not me, adjusting something beyond my line of sight. Then he declared they were recording, and Plague Rites stood in their circle of ocean wave tea lights and began their embarrassingly terrible chanting. Nate led the ceremony as Matt and Craig repeated words almost certainly copied from a Norwegian to English dictionary. Not that I understood any of it, but it was pretty obvious they didn't either. I saw Craig and Matt take the buckets of pig's blood and splash them all over the room. The trio began to shout the names of Satan and various demons: Lucifer, Beelzebub, Asmodeus. They walked up to me with their fingers in the sign of devil horns, howling and laughing. And that was pretty much it. They turned on the lights and blew out the candles. "You think we got it?" asked Matt. "Hell yeah," said Nate. "Gonna be badass." Badass. All right, boys. Well, they spent the rest of the evening scrubbing and scraping wax and blood off the old area rug lest they forfeited the $300 they'd been promised. And when they finished, they went off to different rooms where they had found beds. They slept peacefully. At first. But later that same night, I saw Craig holding himself on the parlor sofa, visibly shaking as his friends listened to his hysterics. He insisted that a woman had come into his room. She had grabbed the sides of his head and had shaken him awake. She'd been laughing like a maniac, he said, and he could still hear that laughter in his head even now. "Was she hot at least?" said Matt, but no one laughed. Craig said he'd been paralyzed as this woman took a rusty kitchen knife and carved out a strip of flesh from her face. She tried to force it down his throat. When he resisted, she then tried to pry his teeth apart. "She was begging me to eat her," Craig insisted. "She kept cutting off more and more skin and saying I had to eat it because I'm the key. There was blood everywhere. I can taste it. I don't think we should have done the thing with the blood, guys. I don't think we should have fucked around with that shit." "Dude, I promise you, it was just a dream," said Nate. "Listen, remember in the 5th grade when you stayed the night and we watched Friday the 13th Part 2? "Yeah, but," Craig started, but Nate continued. "Remember how you woke up screaming because you thought your dad got out of jail and was in my house, and then it turned out everything you said you saw was from the movie?" Matt was covering his face to stifle his laughter, but Nate was dead serious. "You know I'm right, man," he said. "It just felt so real," Craig said. "Like I can smell her blood still." Nate pointed out that if some crazy woman had been in the house cutting herself up, there would be blood all over Craig, and they all probably would have heard something. Craig seemed to accept this observation and nodded. Then Matt noticed something. He said, "Oh shit, your lip's bleeding. Let's tuck to your chin." Nate shook his head. He said, "Don't." "No, I'm serious," said Matt as he peered closer at Craig. Nate looked too. "He just bit his lip," said Nate. "That's his own skin." But it was too late. Craig was hysterical again. Nate glanced in my direction and then shot an annoyed look at Matt. "Shut the fucking camera off, dude. Jesus Christ." Now it was daylight. Matt and Craig were sitting at the kitchen table while Craig voraciously devoured one Little Debbie snack cake before immediately unwrapping another. More empty wrappers lay in front of him. "You good today?" I heard Nate say. Craig nodded wordlessly, chewing, and held his thumb up. In response, Matt and Nate cheered, air guitared, and declared plague rites would take over the world. Meanwhile, Craig just ate and ate and ate, as if he might never eat again. The following days and nights passed like clips from a montage. The boys were practicing a song, if you want to call it that. Nate had written it in the early morning hours. There wasn't much of a melody to speak of, but the lyrics spoke of God's rabid sheep, bleating at the steps of the rat church. Craig kept missing his cues, though. He said he was tired from not sleeping. They called it a day. Then it was night. Craig was panicking again. He saw what looked like the Virgin Mary floating toward his bed in a black veil. He said he still saw her when he closed his eyes. He wanted to go home, but Nate and Matt reasoned with him once more. Then it was practice again. Craig didn't sing at all. He just stood there staring at the floor until Nate lost his temper. Then Nate was apologizing for losing his temper as the boys sat on the kitchen floor eating bologna sandwiches. Except Craig. Craig took his sandwich and left the room. Practice yet again. Craig seemed dazed and then suddenly howled vocals to a song they weren't playing. I couldn't understand most of what he was screaming, but I did distinctly hear the words, "Build them a castle from which none escape, doors into walls and stairs down into their grave." "What the fuck?" Nate shouted, and practice was over. Now Craig was outside, sitting cross-legged in front of Nate's father's car. "What's up with you lately, dude?" Matt was saying. "I don't know," Craig said in a faraway voice. After that, it was scene after scene after scene of just Craig, sitting on the gravel drive in front of the Taurus. Each time he seemed to be whispering to something in the front grille, not just whispering to it, but responding to it, oblivious to the presence of anyone else. Now Nate was standing over Craig with his arms folded over his chest. I couldn't see Matt, but I could hear him mutter, "Dude, the hell is he doing?" Craig started giggling, and Nate told him to knock it off. He said he was being a fucking psycho. "I'm talking to him," Craig said. "Talking to who, dude?" said Nate. Matt snickered, but it sounded nervous to me. That's when Craig looked up at Nate with an utterly baffled expression. "To Satan," he said. "Oh my God," Matt whispered. I don't know how much time had passed by the time I saw Matt and Nate sitting at the kitchen table without Craig. "I think we should go home," Nate was whispering. "If we leave now, we don't get paid," said Matt. "I know, man, but something is seriously fucked up with Craig," said Nate. "He acts like he's in a trance or some shit. I don't think he's sleeping. He spends, all his time sitting in front of the car, listening to Satan. And, when's the last time you saw him eat?" Matt looked like he was about to argue until realization struck him. Nate went on. "He's always taking his food away, right? But we never see him eat it," Matt finished. "That's because he's not," said Nate. "And he looks like shit. Smells like shit," said Matt. Nate continued. "And what about all that stuff he said about being the key, and us being the one who opens the way? Fuck is that?" The two were silent again, and then Matt slowly nodded. "Yeah, we gotta get him home, dude," he said. Suddenly I heard Craig's voice loud and close behind me. "I knew it!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "I fucking knew it! You guys are plotting against me. You don't want me in the band. You're trying to make me leave the house." "It's not what you think, Craig," Nate started. "I have it all on fucking tape!" Craig shouted. There was more shouting, and then a physical scuffle, and then everything switched again. Now Craig sat on the floor in the corner, his chin resting on his knees. "Where are you filming me?" he said. His voice sounded flat, dead. "'Cause your aunt needs to see this, dude," said Nate's voice. "My aunt's a whore," said Craig in that same distant tone. "Don't say that about Vicky, man," said Nate. "She takes care of you when your mom forgets she's your mom." Matt agreed. This wasn't like Craig. "I'm only telling you what he said," Craig explained, still staring at nothing with that perplexed look on his face. "Satan said that?" said Matt. "From the car?" Craig smiled and nodded slowly. Nate motioned for Matt to be quiet and then told Craig he was right all along, that something had happened when they did the ritual. He was sorry they didn't believe him before, but they believed him now. To be honest, I don't think Nate or Matt actually believed anything other than that their friend was having a mental health crisis. But I think they'd have said anything to get him out of there. Good, I thought. Do that. "But the band," said Craig. He was raking his fingernails up and down his knees, leaving angry red streaks. Nate said to forget the band, that America wasn't ready for plague rites, or rats. In fact, they could change the name back to Plague Rats if that's what Craig wanted. They could worry about all that later, but now it was time to go. Craig was softly crying now, snot trickling out of his nose. He didn't say anything. He just nodded in resignation. I felt brief relief for the kids. They couldn't know what they had awakened here. I still don't know. But I knew they were making the right choice in leaving, and I wondered if this was when the house had fallen into disrepair. Did it fall apart because someone finally left it? Did these boys starve it of its human diet? The scene changed once more, and I saw Matt and Nate walking back to the Ford Taurus that sat innocently in the drive. Matt got into the front passenger seat. Nate held open one of the back doors. "Come on, man, let's go," he said, presumably to Craig. "I just wanted to film everything first," said Craig's voice from behind me, "so we don't forget." Well," said Nate, "you got it, so let's go." "Give me a minute," said Craig. "I forgot something inside. It's something I've been working on." I felt like I'd been picked up and put off to the side somewhere. I saw Craig walk away from me and into the house. I saw Nate take his seat behind the wheel of the car and close his door. The back door was still open, waiting for its final passenger. Then I saw Craig return, carrying a large object covered in a black sheet. I couldn't hear what Nate was saying then, but I could see his hands up in confusion as Craig placed the bundle down and uncovered what I saw now was a crude sculpture of what vaguely resembled the Mary statue I had read so much about from others. But this Mary was made of vividly rotting food. He then produced a can of gasoline he'd been hiding in a bush. From his pocket, he pulled out his lighter. I could hear Matt and Nate screaming from inside the car when all of a sudden the back passenger door closed by itself. I heard the locks inside the Taurus click and saw Matt and Nate's hands desperately prying at them without success. Craig poured gasoline all over himself and the car. Then he knelt down to the stream of gasoline on the ground and held his lighter at his knees. "Your will is done, Master," said Craig. Then he turned the driveway into hell on earth, and in the roar of flames that burst higher than any blaze I've ever seen, I swear to God I heard a whisper right in my ear, and the whisper said,
"Yes."
There was screaming for what seemed like an eternity before an abrupt, choked silence. I watched the charred doors of the Taurus fly open by themselves. I saw a black bulge ooze from the opening, and then cool into the shape of a vaguely man-shaped thing, with two human faces on either side of its head. One face was Nate's, the other Matt's. Their eyes had gone pearl white, mouths open in an expression of agony, with only a few stray teeth intact, tongues protruding forcefully at first and then creeping down around their necks like vines. The thing clumsily trod on massive, deformed legs to the front of the smoldering pile that had been the Taurus, gaining confidence in its stride with each new step. In front of it, mangled and melted together, was a pile of bones and caramelized flesh that used to be Craig. The creature studied these bones with one of its faces and picked them up, twisting them like a Rubik's Cube until they took the shape of an electric guitar. An image probably pulled from whatever memories remained in the cells of those dead boys' brains. Strings made of skin stretched across Craig's open jaws. The Nate Matt demon dragged its gnarled fingers across these strings and howled as it produced an unholy cacophony, the music of hell. Jesus Christ, what was this? The sound of it instantly made me sick, but I didn't have a stomach to retch. I was a specter in all this, watching helplessly from a distance. Meanwhile, the monstrosity in front of me kept on playing that cursed song until a hole opened up in the storm clouds above it. Light beamed down from this sky hole, and when the creature gazed up into it, I heard triumphant laughter. But then a second hole opened up in the driveway underneath it, sucking the car and that damned monster into it. I watched as the thing clawed desperately at the edges of the hole, screeching at what must have been rage, as hundreds of arms, shimmering and black and oily, reached up from the ground hole to drag the creature down. Its shrieks rang in my ears, they tore through my head, and then everything was gone. Both holes closed as if they had never been there at all. Only the smell of gasoline and burning rubber lingered, as evidence that anything had ever happened here. There was silence for a long time, and I thought surely I'd hear sirens eventually, but there was nothing. No one heard. Then the whole scene in front of me burned away like a disintegrating film reel. I was back in the present. At least I think it's the present. When I found myself back in my own time, I realized my hand was still inside the VCR. I pulled it out, scraping my knuckles on the edges of the slot to find that I had molten black plastic stuck to my fingers, the casing of the cassette I once pushed in. Still adhered to my palm was the video's masking tape label with now very faded Sharpie, only one upside-down cross still intact. My fingers are burned and bleeding now, and it hurts like a mother. But at the time, I was so shocked I could barely register any pain. And then I threw up. I kept throwing up. And what did I throw up but black VHS film? I need to leave this place. I tried once already, but I'm thinking maybe I didn't try hard enough. This house isn't just haunted. It's some kind of portal. And after what I just saw, I think it's capable of more than time travel. The more, in this case, can't be anything good. Satan, though? I'm not so sure about that. As crazy as every experience here has been, there's a kind of consistency I can't ignore. It's always 12 days, always something vulnerable about each guest, and there's always a requirement for documentation. This doesn't feel like evil for evil's sake. This feels like a series of experiments. But what are you trying to accomplish here, Mr. H? What are you?